We're ready. We're ready.
Okay. Hello and welcome everyone. On this meetup about Azure VMware Solution, I'm Romain, a Microsoft MVP, and I am today with a special guest, Shannon. Hello, Shannon.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
How are you today?
I am well. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Could you tell us a little more about you, please, just before we start?
Sure. So my name is Shannon, and yes, it's pronounced Keen. It's been a hilarious story that I'll save for a future conversation. I'm a senior cloud advocate on the enterprise platforms and tools team that's part of the larger methods and practices team. And I'm today to kind of talk about the next evolution of the Azure VMware Solution, or AVS for short. We did have a first go round. I like to dub it AVS version 1.0. We're now at AVS version 2.0. It's public preview. So wanted to get out there, get the message out that this is a brand new evolution, and hopefully enlighten folks on the ways to make it come into their world and kind of make use of it.
Great. So just before I let you start your presentation, I just want to say to the attendees that they can write them down in the chat the question, and I'll ask for them to Shannon at the end of the session. Okay.
Cool. So I'm getting. Is the echo? Is it going away? Is it still around?
I can hear you well.
Yeah, it looks like folks are indicating that there's some echo.
Oh. So, your mic is really low now.
Apologies.
That's good.
That's working. Is that better?
Yeah? No. I can't hear you at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Roman, do you want to try muting yours for a second? Let's see if that might be the issue.
Yeah.
Okay. How is that? Better?
Better, yes.
Okay. Oh, shoot. Low volume echo. Let's do this. So crazy. What's the echo?
Do you have the YouTube video in background, maybe?
Oh, you know what? Hang on. Yes, I do. You did tell me to turn that off. How is that? Is that better, folks?
Yes, it's better.
Okay. My apologies. Roman did say Shannon don't have this open, and I kept it open. Didn't even realize I had it. So my apologies. Anyway. So I'm happy to start in and get folks comfortable with solutions look like, and get to answer some questions up with the folks that are tuning in. As I mentioned, I'm cloud advocate on the enterprise platforms. These are great ways to connect. I'm great ways to connect on Twitter, and documentation. We provided the URL, provided the short URL to remember over time. It'll take you to the brand new documentation that exists for AVS version. But I did want to say, everybody at this time rated over your time rated. I used to show up in person. Now we're doing it remote. A large variety of folks tuning in. So maybe there's a positive. Maybe there's a positive. We're making more global and reaching a broader audience as a result. Let's make sure. Okay. Let's make sure. So let's first start by introducing the service. So Azure VMware Solution delivers a comprehensive environment and service which allows customers to run Azure workloads inside Azure, but inside of Azure VMware. So yes, now runs VMware workloads in Azure, kind of like an Azure pattern, kind of like an Azure pattern, and it's now. But it's definitely a new day in cloud computing at Microsoft. So Azure VMware Solution Azure VMware Solution kind of breaks that paradigm in Azure. Customers can now migrate VMs directly from on-prem to Azure, landing on bare metal, landing on hyper-converged.
We have some echo. I try to figure out why we have this echo. Okay, just 2 minutes.
Okay. Sure. Apologies, folks. Apologies, folks. We thought we had this figured out. I can move back. I can move back. Let me
Sorry,
see
guys.
something here. Let me see something here. Is it still an echo on my end? Is it still an echo on my end? Take a look at something here. Okay, let me go down to.
Okay, I think I know. Let's try it. It's better now?
Is it echo when I speak, or is it echo when Romain speaks?
It's better now? Yeah. Sorry, guys. It's my fault.
Oh! Well, hey, it's the dawning of a new age. We're all trying to figure out how to do this stuff remotely. Not easy. So apologies on the echoes. Hopefully that's been fixed. And I can kind of walk everybody through the scenario now. Are we good? Should I keep going?
I think it's good now.
Okay.
You can go on.
So customers can now migrate VMs directly from on-premises to Azure, landing on bare metal, purpose-built, hyper-converged dedicated nodes to run your VMware VMs. You're running those VMs exactly as you do today in the hypervisor you know and love, VMware vSphere. So customers can now seamlessly run, manage, and secure applications across VMware environments and Microsoft Azure with a common operating framework. Customers will be able to capitalize on their existing VMware investments, the existing skills, tools, including VMware vSphere, vSAN, and vCenter, while leveraging the scale and performance and innovation of Azure. So VMware has certainly made cloud a primary objective in their portfolio of offerings. Cloud is the future, and it's where most organizations are looking to extend their infrastructure of tomorrow. You no longer need to convert your VM systems to Azure IaaS or PaaS to make use of AVS, and that kind of is a great benefit for customers that are trying to think through what digital transformation looks like. The Azure VMware Solution delivers VMware-based private clouds in Azure. The private clouds are built from clusters of dedicated bare metal hosts that are deployed and managed through the Azure portal. Clusters in private clouds are provisioned with VMware vSphere, vCenter, vSAN, and NSX software by default. AVS private cloud hardware and software deployments are fully integrated and automated in Azure. One thing to note is this is not our first time building bare metal and purpose-built solutions for Azure services. Along with AVS, we offer bare metal solutions for SAP, Cray, and NetApp. Using purpose-built bare metal infrastructure allows customers the ability to scale, operate, and not have to compete with a shared virtual environment. Given the complexity of these advanced workloads, it made sense for Microsoft to spend the time and invest in the infrastructure building out bare metal solutions for customers looking to migrate into Azure. So they think of AVS as another solution in this bare metal offering for our services. Digital transformation surrounds 4 distinct pillars. We've got rehost, refactor, re-architect, and rebuild, the 4 R's, so to speak. It's not straightforward to move from left to right, so our goal has been to provide as many options to customers as possible. This helps ease the digital transformation needs for each company. Microsoft now offers Azure VMware Solution as a rehost option, whereas it was only IaaS before. AVS sits on dedicated hosts, so that entire platform falls underneath the Azure dedicated side of our engineering house. This means they're dedicated servers as compared to IaaS environments, which are virtualized servers living in a shared environment. Note, even though it's shared, they're logically separate. So I think everybody wants to get to the right as quickly as possible, but sometimes that isn't easy. Maybe there's a commercial off-the-shelf app that doesn't seem to be getting any new cloud-based development cycles, or maybe a company's proprietary application will take some time to unravel as the original developer doesn't work for the company anymore. Unfortunately, technical debt is hard and ever present, even within the most sophisticated of environments, as I've found, right? But the beauty here is you don't need to install everything in order to be agile and adopt cloud. AVS can help. There are quite a few triggers for application migration and modernization, but it essentially comes down to two main motivations. First, it's breathing new life into an existing application, and second, it's extending a legacy application by adding new functionality. Migration becomes the quickest way to unlock the benefits of the flexible and scalable cloud infrastructure inside Azure. So migration triggers include consolidation of data centers, hardware refresh cycles, or a general move away from on-premises systems. The AVS's kind of sweet spot is right at this point. You can migrate your VM workloads to Azure quickly using a platform that you know and you trust, and you've got existing skills and kind of development inside that realm. Modernization tends to require more effort, but it unlocks more advanced cloud capabilities, such as increased business agility, global scale, and improved resiliency of the applications that you provide your end users. Modernization triggers include wanting to deliver applications and faster features to users and customers. Maybe you're addressing security vulnerabilities in a better way to help out that legacy code, or maybe it's outdated code. You can also enable new business opportunities with innovative applications on the modernization front. The one thing here is AVS really surrounds migration, but you can think about adopting modernization practices at the point of migrating your platform into Azure. So you can think through ways of adopting Azure Active Directory or advanced analytics, something of that sort. Once you're plugged into the Azure ecosystem, it's a little easier to take on Azure services. VMware workloads fall into two areas where you can configure, manage, and control within vCenter outright, within the Azure Service Fabric, and you'll access those VMs by leaning on RESTful APIs with PowerShell, the AZ CLI, the Azure portal, or maybe even an ARM template or a Terraform template. So the VM shows up as a vCenter VM and also as a VM object in Azure with a network card, with disks, etc., right? So dependent upon your operations style, this offers a wide range of possibilities related to scale, automation, and fast provisioning of VMs within your environment. You can also take on Azure at a time that's convenient for you. You don't have to think about analysis by paralysis. Your company gets to keep using VMware investments, skills, and tools to support the range of business applications on a day-to-day basis with vSphere, vSAN, and vCenter. Another aspect that I want to bring up is you gain the opportunity to modernize your VMware workloads, as I spoke about in the last slide. You can think about taking on, even log analytics, Azure Security Center, all of these native services inside of Azure once your VMs are inside the AVS platform within Azure. This kind of unlocks new and intelligent features just by making use of our bare metal offering in Azure. So I think of this as kind of an achievement unlocked. We offer some compelling pricing benefits for Windows Server as well, and then SQL Server. I'll talk about that a little later in my presentation. And finally, you can be rest assured that the Azure VMware Solution is a first-party Microsoft offering backed by VMware. In this diagram, you can see the adjacency between private clouds and VNets in Azure, Azure services, and on-premises environments. So network access from private clouds to Azure services or VNets provides SLA-driven integration of Azure service endpoints. Private cloud access from on-premises environments uses ExpressRoute Global Reach for a private and secure connection. Then, once you've deployed AVS, you gain access to the feature-rich offerings within the Azure portal, as it's kind of highlighted here. Let's step through the new and differentiated features because we did have a version 1.0 of our AVS offering, and some features have changed for the better. So AVS version 2.0, that's kind of what I call it, right? You can just call it AVS. It doesn't really matter. But if you're talking to a Microsoft person, it might make sense to indicate which version of AVS you're talking about. This is a first-party Azure service, and it's cloud certified by VMware. Then there's the seamless Azure experience and native integration that should hopefully shed light where everything you need to configure happens in the same Azure portal, where you would configure a service like a VM or a load balancer or a web app, right? Companies can make use of the Azure hybrid use benefit for licensing costs with Windows and SQL Server, which reduces CapEx costs. Then if you're still running Windows Server 2008 or 2008 R2, or maybe the SQL variant, you can think through being eligible for the no-cost extended security updates in Azure by using AVS. Patching your environment becomes more cost-effective by migrating these VMs into Azure using AVS. So, and if there are issues with your AVS environment, you need to maybe escalate with support. You only have to call Microsoft. So Microsoft will coordinate with VMware to resolve any issues you may face within your AVS environment. From there, you have to think through technology updates, right? So the AVS environment supports the latest VMware technology updates. So that'll continue to help you related to the lifecycle management, and that way you're always on the latest and greatest hardware solution. Let me take a look at a chat here. I don't have. Let's see. Oh, okay. So maybe I'm still good. So if I've missed anything or if there are any good questions, I think Mod's playing the part of my moderator, so you can just feed him into the chat and I will get around to answering some of those. But wanted to at least let you know that I'm going to kind of present this, showcase what we've got, and then we'll do Q&A towards the latter half of the meetup. Let's see. So Hybrid Cloud Exchange, or HCX Enterprise Edition, is available. This helps you migrate those VMs between on-premises and Azure using vMotion. So there's some cool features there. Our AVS nodes are on fast and highly performant bare metal hyper-converged infrastructure. So that's a really cool thing there. As well as there's a unified licensing and consumption model using AVS and Azure, which makes cost optimization and tracking those costs a little easier because there's kind of a single pane to go to versus multiple different spots to try and piece together the solution. There's also a simplified NSX interface using AVS version 2.0. So you have your familiar VMware interface, which means your operational best practices, standard operating procedures, etc., can be met using the same platform as you do on premises. That's got to feel good, right? There's a little less apprehension and anxiety once you see the same platform you're used to seeing on a daily basis. And then it's really as simple as selecting the service from the Azure portal, filling in the required fields and deploying. It's a definite change in the positive direction for version 2.0. So AVS runs on Azure for a modern, well-managed infrastructure, including high availability, disaster recovery, and backup. Plus, there's a rich third-party ecosystem in the marketplace as well that can be plugged into. Maybe that's to help augment what you're doing, or maybe it's to bridge any sort of gap that you've got at the present time. So you can think of AVS as another tool in your tool belt. If the timing is right and you're ready to kind of make that hop, you sort of unlock even greater potential once you lean on Azure to help run these advanced workloads on bare metal servers. As of right now, these are the different software and hardware specifications. I won't read the slide per se. I'll have it showcase itself in the background. Everything's called out here in the slide. These specifications will likely evolve and change as time marches forward. So that's something to pay attention to because vSphere 7 just released, right? So keep in mind, we approach this in a very iterative fashion. Our partners are evolving, we're evolving. We have to certify and validate that this actually will work for you. So at some point, I suspect we'll see vSphere 7.0. But we don't have anything to share at the present time. So, wanted to at least alleviate the sense of, well, vSphere 7's out, but you're providing me 6.7 update 3. What's going on? This is on kind of a roadmap item. And once you get glued into your account team to help you realize the service, they can start providing some of the NDA info to you, so long as you don't sit around and spread it on Twitter or LinkedIn, right? So that's one great thing of having a glued into Microsoft dedicated account team. Another thing here is billing is a monthly pay-as-you-go sort of piece here, right? You could also use reserved instance. Keep in mind, though, that will only be available once the service reaches GA. But that's another way to think about reducing your overall costs of running your infrastructure in Azure. And then the math is kind of called out down there. It requires a minimum of 3 nodes. You can add single nodes as required. So these are the common use cases or scenarios that we tend to see. In terms of data center expansion, reduction, or retirement, you can gain additional capacity when you reach the limits of your existing data center threshold. So it's easy to add needed capacity in the cloud and eliminate any headaches of managing hardware refreshes. So customers can reduce the risk and cost of cloud migrations by using AVS compared to the sometimes time-consuming conversions or re-architecture. Plus, you're already using the familiar VMware tools and skills to accelerate those cloud migrations, which really helps in terms of timing. In the cloud, customers can then make full use of Azure services to modernize those apps at a pace that's right for your company. You could also think about using it for disaster recovery and business continuity. So you could lean on AVS to establish remote access to data and apps in Azure. With high bandwidth connections using ExpressRoute, you can recover quickly from incidents. Low latency networks give you the fast response times that users come to expect from their business applications. With AVS, it's easy to replicate VMs, all of your policies, and all of your networking configurations using familiar VMware tools. The ease of recovery and replication kind of greatly reduces the effort and risk of creating and managing DR implementations. And then from there, we've talked about it and kind of alluded towards it, right? There's a speed and simplification of migration. So you don't need to convert those VMs to IaaS or PaaS, and you can quickly migrate using HCX. It's a pretty straightforward process to kind of make that VM move from on-prem and into Azure. And even though AVS is a lift and shift model and kind of is that version 1.0 of what a digital transformation looks like in terms of each company's moving that mark forward, you can use Azure Active Directory and analytics or AI to think about adding intelligent features into what you're already doing by making your VMs live in AVS on Azure. So I want to take some time and talk through the deployment steps at a high level. This will hopefully demystify the process. Obviously, there's more involvement, but I want to at least cover it from a high level. So SDDC, that's software-defined data center, you'll probably see that a couple of times on the deck. I tried to call it out, but really I'm overlaid on top of the PowerPoint, so this kind of became a concession I had to make, right? So every time you see SDDC, it's software-defined data center. So these are the high-level steps when you deploy inside a software-defined data center through Azure. You'll first deploy the AVS private cloud. From there, you'll create a virtualized network or a VNet. If you're not familiar with Azure terms, that's kind of what it is. And then you'll create a jump box in Azure to access the AVS environment from on-premises. You'll then create a gateway subnet in the VNet. You'll deploy a VNet gateway and provide an auth key that you'll generate in the portal to connect your on-premises environment into Azure using ExpressRoute. Finally, you'll connect your ExpressRoute to the VNet gateway. And it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, there's more steps involved, but that's the high-level overview. Then when you connect the VMware environment to on-premises, from on-premises to the AVS environment, these will be the steps that you'll follow. So you'll RDP to the jump box that you created during the provisioning cycles of the AVS service. You'll create, you'll connect to the vCenter inside the jump box. From there, you'll connect to NSXT, and then you will enable global reach for the on-premises access. From there, you'll configure the on-premises environment with VMware Identity Manager, which is the Identify as a Service offering from VMware that provides single sign-on capabilities and user-based controls within a vSphere environment. And then, I am oversimplifying the process a bit. Each step is a little bit more involved, and there are prereqs and things to pay attention to as you plot this out. But I think it's straightforward enough to understand, right? There's some configuration changes that need to be made on-prem, and there's some configuration changes that need to be made in Azure so that your solution really is a hybrid solution that extends your VMware footprint into Azure as your cloud provider. Next, let's move on into the management pieces of AVS to cover that topic at a high level. So the beauty of running VMware in Azure is you and your team will already be extremely familiar with all of the VMware tools and technology. I mean, after all, it's VMware vSphere on Azure. Using AVS allows you to create operational consistency for admins, since you'll be using the vSphere client to access your cluster plus all VMs, and then you'll make use of the NSXT manager. Access to vSphere, HCX, and NSXT are enabled through the private cloud deployment process in Azure. Credentials are registered in Azure to connect to the private cluster hosts as well. There's an ability to easily scale the infrastructure to match business needs through the Azure portal. So another thing to note is, if you do it through the portal or if you configure through the portal, there's a REST API equivalent. So you could even think about automating some of this scale if you need it. You can add new nodes as required to increase compute and storage during peak times. Provides you a lot of flexibility, right? You could also delete those nodes too by the same automation functions that you build out. And the math is called out here kind of really explicitly. We've got a minimum of 3 nodes per cluster. There's a maximum of 16 nodes in a vSphere cluster. And then there's a maximum of 64 nodes to an Azure private cloud instance. Often, we show where the division of responsibility lies between the customer and Microsoft associated to the shared responsibility model in terms of Azure. This usually comes up in a lot of security conversations or roles and responsibility conversations. The model itself that we showcase is related to Azure All Up, and it looks somewhat similar. Just know that this is the chart we showcase for where the lines of responsibility lie in terms of AVS itself. As you can see, Microsoft abstracts a lot of the ongoing maintenance, security, management, etc., leaving your company in charge of the things that matter most, right? So guest OS provisioning, applications, and virtual machines. Plus, you get to think through your own lifecycle process, maybe the configuration management techniques you want to be able to bring to Azure. It sounds like certain types of headaches go away in the solution, right? And if you're like me, you probably like less headaches in general. As time evolves, I really have realized why customers and, consumers of Azure lean on cloud providers. We want to be able to have certain levels of responsibility fall on different providers. And in this instance, it just helps you out related to service interruptions, right? So if you've got everything sitting in AVS on Azure, you're a little bit more likely to have your service be up and functional so long as you've configured it right by following some of the prereq documentation just to kind of get everything up and functional, right? So host maintenance and lifecycle management are done without impact on the capacity or performance of private cloud clusters. Examples of automated host maintenance include firmware upgrades, hardware repair or replacement. Microsoft is responsible for lifecycle management of NSXT appliances such as the NSXT Manager and NSXT edges. Microsoft is also responsible for bootstrapping network config, right? So, such as creating the tier 0 gateway and enabling the north-south routing. As an administrator to your AVS cloud, you're responsible for the NSXT SDN configuration like network segments, distributed firewall rules, tier 1 gateways, and load balancers. One of the key benefits of the Azure VMware Solution private clouds is that the platform is really maintained for you. Platform maintenance includes automated upgrades to a VMware validated software bundle. The upgrades are done regularly, ensuring that you always have the latest validated versions of the software. The AVS private cloud platform includes specific versions of VMware vSphere, ESXi, vSAN, and NSXT software. The private cloud software bundle is validated for use in new private cloud installations and for upgrades of existing private clouds. So the lifecycle management upgrade process doesn't necessarily require downtime for your private clouds. The upgrade process ensures you're automatically using the latest version of the validated AVS private cloud software. So upgrades are applied on a regular cadence, so private clouds are never more than one version behind the latest release of the validated software bundle. So you'll be notified of planned upgrades to your private cloud. You can defer the upgrade if your private cloud is within one version of the latest release. Critical patches and updates are applied when they're validated. You'll be notified in advance of the required critical upgrades as well. So this policy just ensures that your private cloud has critical patches and updates applied as close to immediate as possible. Let's step through the network architecture, as it'll be one of the more important topics to uncover related to your deployment. Network interconnectivity between your Azure VMware Solution private clouds and on-premises environments or virtual networks in Azure enables you to access and use your private cloud. So there are two types of AVS private cloud interconnectivity. There's the basic interconnectivity, which enables you to manage and use your private cloud with only one single virtual network in Azure. And then two, interconnectivity related to on-premises connectivity, which extends the virtual network connectivity to also include interconnectivity between on-premises environments and AVS private clouds. The private cloud is connected to your Azure Virtual Network using an express route connection. So using this service provides that high bandwidth and low latency service, which allows you to access services running in your subscription from the private cloud environment. AVS private clouds require a minimum of a /22 CIDR network address block for subnets. This network topology should always complement your on-premises network or your network in Azure. In order to connect an on-premises network or virtual networks in Azure, there must be a non-overlapping network address block. So to establish full interconnectivity to private cloud, to the private cloud from on-premises, you'll use the Azure portal to enable the ExpressRoute global reach connection between the private cloud ExpressRoute circuit and the on-premises ExpressRoute circuit. This configuration extends the basic connectivity to include access to private clouds from on-premises. An on-premises to Azure Virtual Network ExpressRoute circuit is required to connect from on-premises environments to your private cloud in Azure. This ExpressRoute circuit is in your subscription and isn't really part of the private cloud deployment. The on-premises ExpressRoute circuit is sort of beyond this conversation, but know that if you require on-premises connectivity to your private cloud, you can use an existing ExpressRoute connection, or you can purchase a brand new one from the Azure portal. There's flexibility baked into the solution. Once you've linked ExpressRoute with global reach, the two ExpressRoute circuits will route network traffic between your on-premises environments and your private cloud. To enable full connectivity with an authorization key and in order to enable full connectivity, an authorization key and a private peering ID for global reach can be requested in the portal. You'll use that key and ID to establish the global reach from on-prem into Azure. The routing requirements of this solution require you to kind of plan your network address space, just much like any sort of migration pattern into Azure, just because you don't want it to overlap, very similarly to what we had talked about just kind of in the broad overview. So we also offer a site-to-site VPN solution. Now this is available for POC only. So this type of setup really is in the event you are bringing about express routes and you've never purchased an express route before. So sometimes it takes customers a bit of time to acquire an express route connection from a telco vendor in order to establish that hybrid private connectivity. In the interim, we offer this as a solution for POCs. This way you can onboard AVS and test out migration patterns. Just keep in mind it's POC only, and it's related to some of the HCX functionality related to vMotion. You can also think about, Azure Virtual Network connectivity that, where you would need access into your Azure virtual networks outright. So the ExpressRoute networks between a virtual network and Azure and the AVS private cloud become important in this scenario. The ExpressRoute circuit in this virtual network to private cloud scenario is established when you create a connection from the virtual network in your subscription to the ExpressRoute circuit of your private cloud. The peering uses an authorization key and a circuit ID that you request in the Azure portal, similar to what we've talked about earlier. The ExpressRoute connection that is established through the peering is a private one-to-one connection between your private cloud and the virtual network. You can manage your private cloud, consume workloads in your private cloud, and access Azure services over that ExpressRoute connection. You need another /22 network in this scenario, and that address space shouldn't overlap with any address space in the subscription itself. And then you think about it this way, right? The routing is BGP based, and it's automatically provisioned and enabled by default for each private cloud deployment. When a private cloud is deployed, you're provided with the IP address for the vCenter and the NSXT manager. To access those management interfaces, you'll have to create additional resources within your subscription to be able to access and configure like how you would in the on-prem world. Essentially, you design the private cloud logically and implement that design with NSXT. So the private cloud becomes a piece that's configured with, it's pre-provisioned with NSXT. So, you get a tier 0 gateway and a tier 1 gateway that are also pre-provisioned for you. You can create a segment and attach that to the existing tier 1 gateway, or you can attach it to a new tier 1 gateway that you define. So NSXT logical components provide that east-west connectivity between workloads. And it also can provide north-south connectivity to the internet and Azure services. And then this design takes it one step farther and provides a way to access these resources in your private cloud on premises if your AVS environment lives 100% in Azure. The deployment model is similar to using an express route to connect on premises and your private cloud in Azure with global reach. So let's move in here to the migration patterns. I think this is a pretty hot topic. So Microsoft has a number of native tools, and we also have an entire ecosystem of ISVs to lean on for a migration into Azure, right? Think of AVS as another solution. Maybe it's a more seamless solution for your environment. When I've worked with customers, the amount of time spent upskilling kind of stalls that forward momentum. AVS allows you to conduct a vMotion using HCX Enterprise and migrate your VMs on premises to Azure with minimal downtime. I always loved vMotion. It was actually the reason I kind of fell in love with VMware to begin with, right? By that same token, you can extend your VMware tooling into Azure and rely on those tools the same way you do when your environments are in different data centers or colos. The most compelling reason to think this through is related to the idea of upskilling, though, I think, because when you're thinking through a digital transformation, you have to take your operations personnel along with you, and they're at varying levels of skill. If you give them a platform they're used to, you don't have to, you can take on that training and that upskilling at a time that's convenient for you. So deploying AVS in Azure is a few clicks and configurations. Then the rest of the management pane is like everything else you already manage within your vCenter environment. Plus, as we've covered, you can migrate into Azure and gain access to all of these great native services like Azure Backup, Azure Security Center, Azure Monitor, et cetera. There's a lot of really cool features you sort of unlock by migrating your VMs into Azure. Similar to other native third-party tools, companies need to assess their VMware environment using Sizer. From there, customers will have a better understanding of the workloads to migrate. This migration approach can be done as a live migration, a bulk migration, or a cold migration using HCX. Plotting everything out in this manner means customers have more time to identify all steps for workloads to reach full production. Would you take a quick swig of the water? I've got a frog in my throat or two. I'm not sure what the deal is. My apologies. So, of course, customers will want to go through a number of tests and validation, right? That's encouraged on the part of the service. We want you to make sure you feel confident the solution is viable for your company. So you'll create a private cloud, you'll move a few VMs using the preferred migration type, and hopefully encounter no issues because you'll have worked closely with Microsoft during this period, right? So that's a nice big value add. Once the POC is over, then it's time to transition that entire migration pattern to production, where you perform the at-scale migration and adoption of the AVS platform. We've got Microsoft Fast Track that can be plugged in. We also have a large range of certified partners that can be plugged in if your team needs the additional assistance, just to feel confident the solution is the right solution. Hybrid Cloud Exchange, or HCX, becomes the tool to lean on here related to the migrations, right? So HCX Advanced, which is the default installation, supports up to 3 external sites. Each external site requires an HCX Enterprise Manager or connector to be installed and activated. HCX enables migration of your VMware workloads to the cloud and or connected sites through various built-in HCX-supported migration types. If there are more than 3 sites in terms of your deployment model, customers have the option to enable the HCX Enterprise add-on through Microsoft support. HCX Enterprise carries additional charges for customers after general availability, but there's additional features there that a lot of our enterprise customers just love. So HCX can support the large-scale bulk migration of VMs, which is a really compelling story if your environment contains a lot of VMs and you're looking to vacate a data center, for instance, right? HCX also supports any vSphere to vSphere migration pattern, which sort of adds extra functionality to the table. It's really sort of the Swiss Army knife in terms of your migration efforts into Azure. The vSphere version needs to be 5.0 and newer to make use of the migration pattern. And then HCX can be part of a site pairing or DR, which means high availability will follow your app around regardless of where that app lives. HCX offers VM migration parallel threads, which helps speed up the process. Sometimes with other tools, it feels like you move one VM at a time. And then HCX does not require an IP address change. So that's kind of cool. If you need to keep your IP addresses the same, you can with HCX. And then lastly, HCX provides a secure proxy for vMotion and replication traffic to appease the security-minded folks. And then HCX Enterprise allows you to extend the layer 2 networking so both environments have that same IP address, which is kind of a cool reality. You'll need to factor that into the deployment model. That's the only piece you have to be conscious of. In order to set that up, global reach should be configured between on-premises and the Azure VMware Solution SDC. So this is done within the express route circuits. You've got to make sure all required ports are open between on-premises and the Azure VMware solution. You also need one IP address for the HCX manager on premises and a minimum of 2 IP addresses for the interconnect and network extension appliance. So those are some extra pieces to think about as you move forward and try and consider if this is something that you'd want to adopt within your company. Talk a little bit here about storage. So the vSAN storage is a fully configured all-flash vSAN storage. It's local to the cluster. Deduplication and compression are built into the data store by default. So 2 disk groups are created on each node of the vSphere cluster. Each disk group contains 1 cache disk and 3 capacity disks. So the data at rest encryption and the scaling and storage integration, that's all kind of baked in. And you don't have to really worry about it like you would if you deployed it on-prem. In terms of the vSAN storage policy, the policy itself is created on the vSphere cluster and applied to the vSAN data store. This policy determines how the VM storage objects are provisioned and allocated within the data store to guarantee the required level of service. This policy also defines failures to tolerate and the failure tolerance method. So to maintain SLA, you'll want to have 25% capacity available at any given time. And that's just note that's once it reaches GA, because right now when it's in public preview, we don't support SLAs during the product reviews because we're really at that point of our customers dipping their toes in. Let's talk a little bit about security and compliance. So once you deploy AVS, you get the Azure inherited security, right? Which is great. You get the certified data centers, certified hardware, certified cloud environment, the edge security, DDoS protection, identity management, IAM. Those are awesome native services you now are glued into. When you couple that with the VMware inherited security and the private cloud security, it becomes a really compelling security platform all up. And you don't have to worry about migrating into Azure and losing control over some of that security. We'll provide a lot of the inherited security on the Azure front, but then you've got some pieces that are already built into the service outright, as well as you can configure additional security options kind of on top of the platform. As it relates to physical data center security, all locations are staffed 24/7. No unauthorized personnel are allowed in a data center. You actually have to provide business justification. It's not a simple process. You're only allowed into the area in which you've been approved for. So if that's just to walk into the facilities, that's all you get a chance to do. If it's to walk into the data center floor, maybe you're actually doing a data center tour. That's all you get access to, right? So we really take security seriously. Metal detectors are part of the process, so you get scanned on the way in and on the way out. There's a biometric scan upon entry for each one of the employees on site. They have to manage that 2-factor authentication by way of the biometric scan. And there are thousands of security cameras for the data centers that we operate and manage, right? So we don't have to worry about knowing exactly what's going on because we've got a bunch of video cameras focused on the folks that are in the data center at any given time, which ties into this notion that the location of every person is tracked within the DC. Then the private cloud you create with AVS has some great security enhancements, right? So there's the data encryption at rest on the vSAN clusters using external keys. Customers can supply and control external KMS systems. You're not really giving up or adhering to a different set of rules by using AVS. You get to take that same level of security and plug it into Azure. vSAN data services kind of remain unaffected from encryption as well. So factor all of that in. It's kind of a neat proposition. And then these are the compliance certifications AVS will have at general availability. The compliance certifications are definitely a big part of our enterprise cloud strategy, and we push for services that are enterprise ready to hold these certifications kind of out the gate. Additionally, more certifications are under development, and the service will continue to evolve like every service of Azure, right? So we expect more certifications to come on board once the regional rollout of the Azure VMware Solution starts to find itself reaching closer to general availability. Let's talk a little bit here about the Azure services and high availability offerings during preview and what happens after AVS reaches GA. So once AVS is deployed, the rich ecosystem is plugged, that you're plugged into is pretty impeccable, right? There's a list of services available during public preview and kind of what will become available after AVS 2.0 reaches general availability. There's a lot being tracked with the service rollout, and customers in the public preview are being asked for deep feedback so we can make this product more feature rich. Take a look at this. There's some features that are going to be available after GA, and it's going to really make that story even more compelling. You'll be able to hook into some of the Azure native services that our enterprise customers have really loved over the course of Azure's existence. And then we also have components that you can plug into right away once you're in the actual public preview. So you can think about deploying log analytics. You can think about leaning on Azure Security Center and even leaning on Update Manager if that's something that you're interested in. So there's a lot of feature sets that exist right now. There's some that are coming, and I think the service is going to be like every other service of Azure. There will be more down the road. And then our AVS platform lives on modern, well-managed Azure infrastructure, right? So it's designed for that end-to-end availability. There's no single point of failure and really built-in redundancy. So as a result, our managed AVS environment provides robust infrastructure that you can trust and have confidence in. I mean, since we're managing this for you, that's the least we can do, right? So just note that there's a lot of cool features here that you wouldn't necessarily think of having to pay attention to, because we're already building it out for you in a way where it's resilient and where it's highly available. Now, we've covered this briefly, but let's kind of surface or resurface what support looks like. Now, as I've referenced earlier, another solid positive with this service is Microsoft becomes your single point of contact for incident resolution. So since AVS is validated, supported, and certified by VMware and Microsoft, you can call Microsoft for all support-related tickets. Microsoft will address any Azure-related issues and then coordinate with VMware for specific product support. This lessens the burden that customers, need to be responsible for, right? You only need to open up one ticket versus opening up multiple tickets and trying to flag two different vendors for incident resolution. Microsoft becomes that proverbial one throat to choke, which is also awesome, right? Not awesome for us probably, but I mean, it's awesome for you in the sense that you have one place to go versus two. So just make note of that because it's kind of a cool feature to think about related to support. Now, given that everything is in public preview, I only have one demo video to show, and it's to kind of highlight just how easy it is to set this up within the Azure portal. Note that we are working to share more with the broader community, so definitely connect with me so you can see more of what that's going to look like as time unfolds. We're starting to build out really cool content. It's just with, the service being in public preview and us not getting graceful access to it just yet, we've had to kind of cobble some stuff together to at least showcase how straightforward and seamless it is. Now for this demo, as you can see here, let me start the demo. There we go. So it's fairly straightforward to set up an AVS environment, right? Now, despite this offering being on bare metal, it's all integrated within the Azure portal, which helps. It's kind of like if you've ever been involved with an SAP deployment sitting on the S-series VMs, it's very, very similar, right? You don't need to go into a separate area to provision and set up your environment. Plus, the steps are pretty straightforward. This deployment can also be done in a more automated way with PowerShell, the AZ-CLI, or maybe even ARM template, right? But for customers just getting started, this is a fantastic way of validating and solidify the right steps to take so you build that familiarity. To note is the deployment takes minutes versus some of the vSphere deployments and upgrades of old that would take many, many months spread between hardware and software procurement, plus possibly consulting hours, right? So everything spins up, it's a matter of minutes, it's ready to go, and you can access it. So what can I arm you with at the end of our discussion today? Well, first and foremost, take action, right? Talk with your powers that be at your company, right? And do it sooner or later so you can kind of be at the forefront and start to define what the service looks like. We provided this aka.ms link here. It'll take you directly to the AVS documentation for version 2.0. It might be easier to remember the short URL versus a long URL. And then from there, if you're, interested, well, let's take a step back here. We're in the middle of a public preview, so what we have out right now will continue to evolve and shift and change. So, definitely bookmark either that URL or the overview page URL and go back to it and reference it often, because this documentation is evolving and changing. I just submitted a couple of PRs yesterday so that we've got this looking like consistent documentation, right? So if you're already a Microsoft customer and you have a dedicated account team and you're interested in learning more, you can always schedule a demo, right? Your dedicated account team will get you connected with the right folks that can kind of help you figure out what this would look like and realize the value of AVS in terms of your Azure deployments, right? Once you feel you're ready, you can then register your interest in the public preview with your account team and get whitelisted for the service. So that's one thing to make mention of. We kind of joke, it's kind of a white glove preview, right? We got to make sure there's certain things that are met in order for us to be able to build this for you, and we've got to make sure that there's a demand there, right? Sometimes folks POC things that never become full realized solutions in Azure, so we want to make sure that you're confident, you feel like this is a great solution for you, and that you understand the value proposition that Microsoft is providing for you. So that's kind of AVS in a nutshell. I'm early on time, so I can, I suppose, take some of those questions. I don't know if.
Thank you very much
Romain, I don't know if you want to ask the questions. I can just answer them.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I
Sure.
have a couple of questions for you. First one, easy one. Could you share the PowerPoint just after the presentation?
Yes, I can.
Great. Second one. Do you have any videos or hands-on labs for AVS to try the solution?
We don't. So what we're going to wind up doing is we're going to create a lot of click-through demos. And we'll hopefully have all this land on Microsoft Learn. So I'm not sure if everybody knows about this. Follow me and I'll showcase how to get on to some of these sites. But you can get on Microsoft Learn, and we're developing content right now. It's going to be a series of click-through demos. If you think about it, this has to live on bare metal. So it's going to be easier for us to build it.
Yeah, good. Next question. AVS does support the stretch cluster. For example, could you deploy AVS between two Azure regions?
Specialized resources, I call them the global black belts, right? They'll come in and they'll be able to provide more of that info to you. I am not sure the latest and the greatest. I know it's a want, but I don't think it's going to be available at GA.
Okay. Sorry, Shannon. I mute you in the video. So
no worries.
No worries. Again, the questions.
Yeah, sure. No worries. So right now, I don't believe it's available. And this would be a good opportunity to get glued into the global black belts. They're highly specialized resources that can come in and help you understand what that looks like. And I know it's something that's been talked about or talked through. So I suspect it sits on a roadmap or probably a backlog somewhere, and getting glued into your account team is really going to be the best way to uncover what the latest and greatest is. But to my knowledge, it's not available right now. It's not to say it's never going to be a thing. It's just not available right now.
Okay, great. Other question. Sorry, I read the question. I have some question about Cloud Simple. Could you tell us what is the difference between AVS between the 1.0 and 2.0 about Cloud Simple?
Sure. So Cloud Simple was the first vendor we leaned on for AVS version 1.0. We have chosen to make it a first-party offering for version 2.0. And if you have a Cloud Simple environment up and functional, we're still supporting it, right? It's not that we're not going to pull the plug, right? Or we're going to pull the plug, I should say. We won't. We're still supporting that environment. But we chose to make this be a first-party offering on Azure that's certified by VMware versus leaning on a vendor to provide that. And so we've chosen that model because we listened to some of the feedback our enterprise customers were providing. And, we're excited about the fact that it's a first-party service this time around. Does that kind of answer
for me? Yes.
What folks were curious about? Okay.
Okay, I take the other question if they have other question in the chat. Okay. Other questions about updates. How updates are handled for hypervisor, for VM, for guest OS, and so on?
So the updates for the guest OS, that is your responsibility. So when you think about an IaaS land, you'll be responsible for managing and patching your VMs, right? Same thing exists in the world of VMware. You'll be on the hook for managing patches, security updates, et cetera. So you'll have to have some sort of patch management solution. You can lean on Azure Update Management. That's a solution that will work. You can have a hard-coded, Yum repo if you have a bunch of Linux VMs, right? So you're still going to be on the hook for patching your own guest OSs, but all of the infrastructure that your guest OSs live on, Microsoft will patch and maintain for you.
Okay. Other question about the network. Does the express route only useful for management, or is useful also for vMotion and so on?
It's used for management and for vMotion, right? So it's the full yard of establishing that hybrid connectivity, right? So express routes used for the full gamut of solutions, right? So from vMotion to management to full-blown just network connectivity outright. So the express route is going to be a big probably point of contention, at least at first, because you're going to need it in order to have it be fully supported end to end.
Okay, and in your experience, did you have any issues with latency, for example?
I have not, and I think if you are experiencing latency, this might be a great opportunity to get glued into your account teams and have them get a global black belt to come out. Those folks are the ones that work directly with our customers, and they'll be the ones to actually help you plot out network latency, or at least plot out your deployment so you avoid the network latency. When I've worked with customers previously, I haven't noticed latency that wouldn't be outside of the norm, so to speak. And if you are noticing something like that, you can do one of two things. You can, open up a support ticket. That's always encouraged. You'll want to make sure that you escalate to get the right resources, because you may not get the right resources initially. You may have to kind of make sure that you message it correctly to get the right specialized resource in to kind of examine what's happening. And then, from there, if you haven't deployed an express route before, our global black belts can come in and have conversations with you on the right way to think about what that enterprise architecture is going to look like.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Another question. Does the solution AVS is designed to support SAP TDI implementation? Do you know that?
What was that again?
SAP TDI.
Oh, so not at the present time. I know that's been a huge feedback item. So still the SAP workloads will have to live in the SAP certified, I guess, IaaS VMs, right? So that's I'm sure there's conversations that are being that are happening behind closed doors right now between SAP and Microsoft. Since this is an offering and since it's in public preview, there's always a possibility it could come out at some point. But I know that there's been a lot of feedback from the SAP CSAs. So we now have dedicated CSAs that are focused on migrating SAP workloads into Azure. And when I migrated into my current role, when I moved in my current role, all of them reached out to me and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you have to let me know if this is ever going to be a thing," because everybody would just go crazy. They would be so excited for it. So it doesn't exist now. That's not to say it will never exist. And then it's just a matter of continuing to provide feedback through your Microsoft channels, right? Your dedicated account teams. If you've got a SAP CSA or you're starting to think about an SAP migration, work with your account teams. They can get the right resources available to get you glued into that right rich SME expertise kind of that exists at Microsoft now. And then from there, they should be able to start championing what you're looking for from like a feedback perspective.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question about graphic cards. Do you support graphic cards on host in AVS?
So at the present time, no, but that's again not to say that's going to never be supported, right? I think it's a matter of this service is going to evolve and you're going to see a lot of more complex workloads like something that's GPU intensive fall on Azure, right, or AVS. So, the VMs exist right now. If you need to make use of it faster, if you need to make use of it inside VMware, I think it's just a matter of expressing interest, getting glued into the service, hanging out, continuing to provide feedback, watching that service grow and mature, and then indicating you would like GPU-based workloads to be able to land on AVS, because I think it's a definite want on the part of anybody who's ever managed infrastructure, right? You want to make sure that your workloads can exist in AVS as they do on-prem. I think there's a good conversation point to be had there.
Okay. Last question I have. Nathan D has a client who is considering to implement AVS as a hybrid solution, but the partner doesn't want to manage the on-premise VMware solution, and they want to manage AVS in Azure. They can help this customer, or they have to manage also the infrastructure on premises.
So that gets really interesting. The way I always understand it is there are SIs or system integrators that could handle the VMware solution on-prem, and then there are SIs that are certified to handle AVS in Azure. Not every single SI out there can do both, and that's fine. I think it's just a matter of if the expertise doesn't exist with your internal staff, there are kind of SIs you can get plugged into. So this would be an opportunity to open up and strike a dialogue with your account team. They can go and get you in front of our wide network of consultancies that can handle your VMware workload on-prem. And some of them are starting to get certified so they can do both. But I know that that's a little more rare at this point, especially given the fact that AVS is still in kind of a public preview state. So I'd suspect if you're kind of in that point where you're considering a migration pattern and you're either getting pushback from the vendor that's doing the AVS side or getting pushback from the vendor who's more in charge of your on-prem VMware environment, I'd say, try and figure out where the gaps are. Talk to your account team. Your account team can get you glued into SIs that could, come in and facilitate what that migration pattern and then standing up that environment would look like.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Do you have any question in the chat? Oh, that's all.
I would say I don't know. Mod, I don't know. Did you? I had to close my window because I was causing echo.
No. I asked to the attendees.
Oh. No, I don't. But I hope everybody found this, enlightening, and I hope that if there's any questions, if you want to go deeper offline, feel free to connect with me, and I'll get you glued into the right people. I know a lot of things, but I don't know everything, so I'll try and get you answers that you're looking for. And in the event I don't know the answer, I probably got somebody that knows the answer, and I can get you glued into that person.
Great.
All right.
I have a question, but I don't understand the question. The question is there any existing SKU to choose the virtual machine?
That gets really interesting. That I'd have to go and research. That I'm not positive off the top of my head. Because when I've played around with it or when I've looked at videos previously, I didn't see a way to specify that, but I suspect there is a way to specify that. I can, I don't know if you want to grab who that came from, Romain. I can, reach out to that person or tweet something or post something on LinkedIn that answers it for folks if they're interested. But yeah, that's a little bit of a question mark for me.
Okay. And I have another question about Key Vault. Do you support Key Vault with AVS?
We do. So you've got capacity to lean on Key Vault outright, or you can lean on an HSM-backed Key Vault. So there's flexibility of both. It just depends upon what makes the most sense from a security perspective within your environment.
Okay. And is VMware Horizon supported?
Not on AVS, but we do have an offering that is deployable within Azure, and we could get that customer could reach out to their account team and get glued into those experts. So there are what I like to call SME pods that exist all over Microsoft. We have one for VMware Horizon, but right now it's a marketplace offering. It's not wrapped into AVS.
Okay. Other question, if I have two data centers with overlapping IP address ranges, do you think I could still use the layer 2 extensions to consolidate into one Azure virtual network?
I think it's going to cause problems. I think that's the only thing to be paying attention to, right? So I don't know how saturated your IP address space is at the moment. I don't know if you're maxed out or things of that sort. I've worked with pretty large customers who have really exhausted their IP space in a /16, which is shocking to me. But those customers do exist. And so there might be a way that we could escalate with engineering and figure out a way to make that work. That would be probably a more of like an edge case scenario, but I think there might be something we could think about. But if you've got capacity to think about non-overlapping IP addresses, that's going to be your best bet out the gate without having to think about escalating and treating this kind of as a one-off.
Thanks for the answer. Any other questions? So I think you finished.
I am, and I was so worried about time because I kept timing it over the course of the last couple of days, and I think either I spoke quickly or I had rehearsed it enough. I'm not sure, so I actually finished earlier than I anticipated.
No, it's good. It was good.
Good.
Thank you very much to everyone,
sure.
And thank you to you, Shannon. And I hope to see you again in this YouTube channel.
It'd be awesome. Yeah, definitely. When we've got more to showcase, I'll reach out and we'll schedule a future date to kind of showcase some more of what's going on within AVS.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you very, very much to everyone, and goodbye. Bye.
Bye-bye.